IEEE, in case you're not familiar with it, is the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. It's a global organization. It's actually the largest association of technical people in the world, with almost 500,000 members. And more than 50% of those are outside the United States. Almost 50% is within the United States. IEEE has existed since 1963, so it's been around quite a long time. CQR is the technical committee. There's 26 technical committees within the IEEE Communication Society. CQR is the technical committee for communications, quality, and reliability. In recent years, we've been taking on the topics of user quality of experience and availability, and the association of security to availability. Normally, we'd be meeting with you face to face. The CQR Technical Committee has annual meetings face to face, 3 to 4 days long. But of course, during this COVID period, we're doing this via video, and we've decided instead of doing it week long, we're doing it twice. We're doing it twice during the year for a single day. So we did it in the spring. Now we're doing it in the fall. Our spring topic in May was the impact on networks of the move home due to the COVID lockdowns, where people were transitioning to working from home, learning from home, and even doing everyday things like telehealth from home, and what was the impact on the quality of our networks to that move home. And that was a very interesting session. And we began thinking about our fall topic. And while doing that, there were some terrible events occurring here in the United States that upset all of us. And it really opened our eyes to where we needed to focus that fall workshop. We'd like to believe that we are in an industry that can be an example for the rest of society. An industry where people are judged for their talents, for their knowledge, for their contributions and their work, and nothing else. And we think by highlighting that, we can serve as an example for the rest of society. So we decided, we had conversations as a technical committee. We listened to our Black members, and we decided what we can do is have this workshop today to provide a platform for Black Americans to showcase and highlight the contributions that they're making in our industry today and how they're affecting the networks that we'll be using tomorrow.
Why am I talking about him? What is the story in relation to the subject? When he becomes successful, he remembers his roots. He remembers how hard it was to get the good advice to do the kind of things he enjoyed doing. Nobody in his community even envisioned going to engineering school and making a living out of it. So he actually then contributes back to the community by supporting in various cities in America in disadvantaged districts in high school, in even grade school, and reach down to advise the student about opportunity and what they can do in life. It turns out if you don't tell them, many of them see what is around them and would not even imagine a life beyond their surrounding. And this is really opportunity missed if you don't do this. We need to talk to people that don't have a lot of example in his life or her life of success. You don't know how disadvantaged it is if you don't see any example in your life that are taking some of this path. I think we all should extend ourselves to mentor people that are actually capable of doing it. Along the way, it's more than just advising to go in certain path. They would not be very seasoned or street smart about taking all kinds of obstacles. We all have obstacles. And if we have example in our family and our friends who have taken on some of this obstacle, we can by association know what to do much better. But if you have no association or no knowledge, or in your inner circle, nobody even walk on those paths, you are so vulnerable, so insecure, and rudderless. And I think the invisible, inconspicuous hand has to do with helping them analyze the situation, help them think through the options, and give them examples what other people do. Okay, this is not favoring certain person because I want to have a equal result. This is actually to provide background that other people have. It is purely leveling the playing field. So with that as a theme, I want to come back to the fact that the communication society take this very seriously. And I'll tell you why. If you think that there are particular segment of the population that by their background and their upbringing was not able to go into a certain career, and they are perfectly capable of doing it based on their intelligence and the drive, it is an opportunity missed by the society not to promote them, to get into the right field. And it is not just benefit to the individual, but it's benefit to the whole society as a whole.
In various forms of education, right? Because in many ways we're talking about, from early childhood education, which we know, again, there's a substantial gap. We're talking about the many gaps that exist as far as kids from certain backgrounds having access to that, and the disproportionate effect on African American, Latinx communities, to even pursuing STEM education as well, which we also know there's a substantial gap. And then along the way, access, whether it's access to broadband, access to computing devices, access and adoption of actual technology itself, this idea of not being afraid. And there's also this idea we used to talk about as far as behind the camera, but in front of the camera, behind the camera. Now it's actually using the service as a consumer and actually wanting to develop the service as well as a coder, a software developer as well. So you still have this idea of, are we simply consumers, or are we also going to be part of the development of the products themselves? That ties into the bias that goes into these decision-making engines themselves, right? And if you are already informed or misinformed, that gets baked into the product. I do have to say though, I very much appreciate the concept of this need for systemic approach, as opposed to individuals, because all the companies represented here are all part of helping to close these various divides, and we do it in very different ways. The Comcast Internet Essentials program was mentioned, but all the companies have programs in place to reach out. But it has to be done on a systemic basis. Right? We need these various approaches, but we also need an approach that is universal, an approach to make sure that we, reach behind and engage everyone across the board. I very much enjoyed this panel discussion. I've enjoyed learning more about you all, high achieving African Americans in the ICT sector. So thank you very much for sharing your perspective. It wouldn't be right among us to not say, may God continue to bless you all, because we all are driven by that. And also for us to continue to achieve, to really put a step forward, to do our best, and also always make sure that we look back, help others, and pay forward as well. So thank you very much. Very much appreciate the panel conversation.
I am old enough to remember the comic book Dick Tracy, where Dick Tracy had a watch phone, and we all thought, wow, that's amazing. When will that be available, or will it ever be available for us? I think back to my early days in telecom, where I'm going to say something that most of you on this session probably aren't even aware of. I remember when 5G was TDMA, and we went from TDMA to CDMA, and from CDMA to GSM, along with the other technologies that have evolved in this industry, in the telecommunications industry, that make it possible for us to communicate the way we do today. So from my perspective and my responsibilities at Ericsson, we concentrate mainly on customer support and making sure that the customers that we do support, their networks are running at their optimum level at all times. We are engaged with the customer to not only upgrade software, but also upgrade hardware such that the technology of the future can be used in the best possible way that we can. As you see on the screen, when we talk about networks of the future, we want to help the customer improve network performance with network intelligence. Now, all of you have probably heard of AI, artificial intelligence. We look to use that not only for looking at the future, but also determining where there might be problems in a customer's network. We take the knowledge and from the data that is presented, and we look at trends. We look at what's happening in the network such that we can help the customer prevent things that would have issues in their network or cause emergency events where the network is down, which would then impact the end consumer, which is you and I. We want to be able to always use our devices, whether that it be an iPad, our phone, our TVs connected to our iPads. I mean, if you think about the world that we live in, there are so many different ways to stay connected these days. Whenever we have a loss of that connection, it's almost like it ends our world. If my children are not able to use their phone to text their friends, to go out and Google stuff, to look at what the latest restaurant has on its menu, it's like their world has crashed and burned. That's where we are today. Things are at our fingertips. But along with that, I think we need to ensure that those areas that are predominantly Black, and we know that those neighborhoods are out there, that those areas have access to the technology. I look at what's going on in the Dallas Independent School District today, and there are pockets where children whom their parents have decided they can't virtually go to school, they have to show up in the classroom because they don't have technology and connectivity in their homes. So it's, no pun intended, virtually impossible for these children to learn from home. Now, there have been private donations given for not only money, but computers to go into those homes and to have internet connections brought into those homes. But it's not enough. There needs to be more. We can't leave any child behind for our future to be strong. And let's not fool ourselves. There are things that are being done with our government officials to hold those children back, to try and keep them from advancing. So what Vicki said about education is right on. And we need to ensure that we have the capability for those whom are disenfranchised and those whom don't have a level playing field, have that opportunity afforded to them, because it will only make our society better. And that's what we should do and what we should strive for when we talk about diversity. If we are all capable, that makes us all better.
And so when I think of the evolution of our technology and the space that we're in, wow, we've seen a lot in just 3 short decades. And so one of the things that we focus on in my organization is really those fundamental elements of service excellence. We want our products to be the best. We want the level of service we provide to be the best. And some of those elements, as you can see on the screen, I won't read them to you, but I think about, just basic reliability. How many times do you go to make a phone call, whether it's on your cell phone or a landline or through, your computer or anything like that, and it's not working, right? Highly frustrating because we've come to rely on it. So reliability in our space is mission critical. When I think about back in the day when I was on the phones on the front line serving customers, for my leader to know how well I was doing, they literally had to listen in on every call. And now we have quality automation. And so we have voice recognition. We have all kind of technology advancements that's making our jobs easier to be able to create world-class customer service and sales professionals to serve our customers. And our customers continue to demand more. They want it real time. They want it now. They want it to be simple, easy, and awesome. And that's something that I'm proud to say my company stands for. And it's something that we're constantly evolving. And it's always a higher gear. So it's never good enough for our standard. We want to skate to where the puck is going, not to where it is. And that's what technology and the advancements and the evolution allows us to do. So thanks, Rudy, for allowing me to share. I will repeat the question just in case some didn't know, but Rudy was asking us, how do we see communications and technology as an enabler in Black America? And for me, it's really about leveling playing field, right? Because when we know our Black Americans have access and opportunity, there's no shortage of talent. There's no shortage of education. Much like Albert was speaking, I watched, not only my great nephew who's 1 work the, Comcast Xfinity voice remote flawlessly, but I also watched my dad, who's almost 93, who just got his iPhone 6 years ago. He's FaceTiming with his family. He's doing word puzzles on the iPhone. He's doing all kind of things on the iPad. And so, we know that we have the capability of learning. It's really about exposure. So for me, Rudy, that's how I believe technology can help Black Americans make sure that we know what's out there, what's available. I'm thankful for Comcast for Internet Essentials. Since 2011, we've connected more than 8 million low-income homes across the country to high-speed internet. And we know once Black America and really everyone has access to the information, then they can act on it and they can be a part of, to Albert's point, the future, and we can help bring them along. So I do see communications and technology playing a major role. And it's really about, and I know Verizon is committed to that as well, getting the internet in the hands and the households of everyone. So back to you, Rudy, and hopefully everyone heard that question.
5G also introduces some new core capabilities, things such as network slicing, which allows the network to essentially be virtualized to allow for greater flexibility in how the network is customized, service offerings that an operator can offer to various segments that it serves. The network is virtualized so that it can be more dynamic and be more cost effective in terms of how it's deployed. And then it is distributed, which means that now there are numerous deployment models that can be used to address specific customer use cases, to address industry verticals, things such as private network working for manufacturing. You can do specialized mobile edge use cases to support certain enterprise applications. And these new features really open up a broad set of possibilities for how businesses operate and for society in general. So if we take just the fact that 5G brings higher data rates, well, that opens up the opportunity to change the way we work, right? In this new normal where we're working and meeting remotely like this, it allows for individuals to collaborate significantly better using better tools. The fact that 5G can be deployed in different bands of spectrum, so low band, mid band, or even millimeter wave, it allows it to be deployed not just in urban areas, but also 5G can reach rural communities, providing access to those individuals. It can transform industries in the sense that a manufacturing floor can move from a wired environment to a wireless environment. And that's primarily because 5G takes advantage of licensed spectrum, which eliminates some of the interference and inconsistent performance that you would associate with a Wi-Fi network. For transportation, the low latency nature of 5G allows for real-time connectivity of vehicles, autonomous vehicles, better control of traffic light and infrastructure and the telematics associated with that. You have edge computing, which plays a key role in that scenario to ensure that vehicle-to-vehicle or vehicle-to-infrastructure communication actually is taking place to enable smart traffic controls, to enable things like the prioritization of emergency services. Augmented reality is an interesting one, and this is enabled by the low latency capabilities of 5G. So we can think of things that are possible now, perhaps using high quality video from remote expert to support someone in a factory, to train personnel, to be able to assemble components with an expert assisting you. And when we apply that tech to healthcare, it becomes really important because now it enables remote diagnostics, something that we could use in the times in which we live now. 5G camera or other devices can enable medical professional to diagnose some conditions without an in-person visit. It helps first responders on site to perhaps triage and diagnose treatments more effectively. So really, when we think about this technology and we think about how pervasive it will become throughout our society, this idea of quality, reliability, ensuring that the service is up and running and that we can rely on it, just like today, right? We rely on our cell phones. We rely on the network to be up and running for us to be connected. 5G networks will be mission critical networks, and they have to be built from the ground up to be highly reliable. And that's why, for me, it's one of those technologies that I am interested in getting in at the early stage, and I'll be very focused on it over the next few years. But for technology to be an enabler in the African American community, I believe that we have to get technology into the minds of Black Americans. Tech is all around us. We create with it. We use it to communicate. But there's a need to go beyond just using tech to where, as African Americans, we are influencing the actual development of that technology. And so first, I think forums like this are helpful to showcase the fact that you can have a highly impactful career in technology, and that there's a variety of ways that you can do that. And by getting involved in technology, you can actually help to transform how people live, the way they work, the way they learn, the way they play, and that these careers are within reach and they're rewarding. So that's one thing. I think a second thing is that we can use communication technology to enable progress by improving access to critical services. So just take, for example, just basic connectivity, getting people access to information. Can we get everyone to be connected, whether they're in an urban community or rural area? Because once connected, you have access to better education. You have improved access to better healthcare, more preventative care, some of the things that you had mentioned earlier, Rudy, better medical resource that can help to improve the quality of life. We can also start looking at ways that technology can create opportunities within our local community. So is there an app that can create an economic advantage that can address a specific local need? So the bottom line for me is that technology can be an enabler in the African American community, but for it to do that, we have to inform our young people of the possibilities in technology. We have to encourage them to get involved and support their curiosity. And I go back to that main point. The one thing that helped me is that we have to mentor them. We have to direct that curiosity and that energy in the right direction at an early age so that it can be impactful in the long term.
First of all, I'd like to say thanks to everyone for taking time out of their day and participating in this conference. I think this is a very important event in that it is highlighting the accomplishments and current contributions of Black leaders in the technology space, which I think that is a very important thing for not just the Black community to understand, but also for the community at large to understand. And simply a way of understanding the dividends that are paid by diversity, right? As I've listened to the talks and panels today, there's three things that have jumped out at me as being as kind of common threads within the careers of everyone we've seen thus far today, right? And that is mentorship, education as an enabler of upward mobility, and and access, right, or lack thereof. And I think what you're going to see with the panelists that that we're going to have in this session is that these are leaders in the technology space that are actually passionate about their communities, passionate about people in general, which I think is a very key part of being a mentor. They all have a passion for education. This is very not that it was saying that any of the other groups weren't, but there's a lot of education and diverse education within this panel. And then one of the things that I've learned from this group in talking with them is just the resolve that they've had to overcome the challenges of the lack of access they may have had through lack of access to technology, lack of access to people who look like them, and lack of access to mentors, how they've worked consistently to overcome those things. And that, along with their education, along with their commitment to society in general, has enabled them to achieve the heights that they have.
So the 8 currencies of 5G are throughput, service deployment, mobility, connected devices, data volume and latency, reliability, and energy efficiency. And with throughput and service deployment, we think about things like autonomous vehicles. We think about manufacturing and the efficiencies that we'll get in factories. When we think about connected devices, we really see 5G enabling the real Internet of Things, where we may have over 1 million connected devices per square kilometer. That's just awesome. From a latency perspective, we're expecting the end-to-end latency to be less than 10 milliseconds, which is a big deal, a difference between 4G, where right now that's between 30 and 40 milliseconds. And then from an energy perspective, we are expecting 5G to be 80% more efficient than 4G. And when we consider the sustainability and we think about the earth and the world, this really is impactful. And at Verizon, we looking at 5G, building it right. It's not just about mobility. You see, we talked about 8 currencies, and mobility is one piece of it. But we're looking at how do we usher in the 4th industrial revolution. Next slide, please. So similar to the generations, I just wanted to talk about the 4th industrial revolution, right? So we know the 1st industrial revolution was about water and steam. The 2nd industrial revolution is about electrical energy. The 3rd industrial revolution about electronics, information technology, computers. And with the 4th industrial revolution, we see that real-time enterprise, where machines will be able to do things that require mental and physical ability, and they'll be able to do it autonomously. When you think about that, it actually sounds a little freaky, but it actually sounds, it's great. It's just bringing us into the next industrial revolution and just the things that we can think about and just innovate and just move on to just much greater things. When I think about it, I think of it from a practical perspective, and what is really excites me is the advances in healthcare. I think about this is October, and this is breast cancer awareness month, and I'm actually a survivor and a thriver of breast cancer, and I'm very, very aware that my outcomes could have been different without the advances in healthcare. It was early detection. And when we think about healthcare, I think about a doctor being 1,000 miles away. You know, that physician, that specialist that you need that may be able to do that surgery 1,000 miles away. I think about a gastroenterologist who's doing a colonoscopy or is doing an endoscopy. And while he's there, as opposed to if he found a polyp, as opposed to he or she actually having to send that polyp out to pathology and wait 7 days or what have you to get those results, that those results can be provided in much sooner. So I'm excited about where we can go with that. I mean, these are just some of the items that I bring up that are important to me, but there's just so many other use cases out there. You know, it can enable bridging the digital divide with content creation, robots to help elderly. You know, there's some elderly out there that don't have anyone around to help them. Maybe we can have a robot that can do that. It'll enable remote work, public safety, smart homes and smart cities, vehicles, and just so much more. So what I encourage you to do, I mean, I know there's a lot of industry here and there's some students. I just encourage everyone to just think out of the box and think what is possible with 5G. Think about what we're not even thinking about right now. I'm excited about it. I'm excited what the future will hold. And I just ask everybody to continue to be bold.
How is 5G possible? What are the building blocks? What are the innovations that make it possible? And what you see on the screen are a number of those are key technologies, not all, but a very high level subset of them. A new radio, for example, to speed up the rates that we're looking at. And if I wanted to visualize that, I would say, just imagine that today we were driving our cars. Imagine if cars could fly and we were able to expand the lanes. So instead of having the 4, 5 road lanes, now we are all flying cars and you have multiple, you have quite a wider space for you. And then we also have COPS, which is the separation of the control plane from the user plane. It's a decoupling of the control plane from the user plane. And the benefit is that it allows you to grow each of these planes independently. And if I wanted to come up with, let's say, something in real life to that, I would ask you, just imagine if we could decouple decision making from politicking. So if we could separate politics from decision making and scale each one of them independently, maybe things will be a whole lot better than they are today, but we are making progress. When we provide 5G, how do we deliver a secure network? Not from a network infrastructure perspective, but from the perspective of the user. So think about it. We're talking 5G, we're talking about massive IoT devices that are communicating. And these IoT devices, if you think about them, they're purpose-built. A smart camera is supposed to beam images. They don't have any antivirus installed on them. So the smart devices, the smart IoT devices that we refer to, well, unlike smart people who have opinions, our smart devices are actually programmed to do exactly what they're supposed to do. So if someone were to hack that device, they could use them to launch attacks. So from a security perspective, part of what we are working on is how do we leverage machine learning? How do we leverage artificial intelligence in order to build behavioral models, not only of devices, the multitude of devices that are going to connect to 5G, but also of the network? How do we model the traffic network? How do we identify anomalies in the behavioral patterns of traffic? And the idea behind it is if you can model the network behavior, if you can guarantee behavioral assurance of a specific device, then you are in a better position to provide a more secure, a more effective, and a more reliable network. I was fresh out of my master's program and I was interviewing for a job. And I think I had aced all the technical questions, but I didn't have the requirement in terms of number of years of experience. I believe the preferred qualification experience was 3 to 5 years. I had about 4 to 6 months. So you can imagine the gap was pretty much very glaring. But I had hustled my way to that interview spot. So, opportunity is important. But one of the final questions that I was asked was, why should we hire you? And I paused for about 10, 15 seconds. It was a pretty long pause. This was a big question. Why should we hire you? And then I replied to them. I mentioned I may not be the most qualified candidate, and I bet the others are more qualified than me, but I can guarantee you two things. First is that I will outwork anybody else you hire. And then the second thing is that I'm a risk worth taking. I'm an investment that you can make, and you will see the rewards and the returns on that investment, because the record that I have, the people who have taken that chance in me have seen that result.
And before we jump into the slides, I want to share also how fortunate I am to have the ability to influence some of the decisions we make at Cox. And that only happens because I'm also fortunate enough to have a seat at the table. I will also share, much like my other panelists, this journey to this seat was anything but linear. It was filled with many pivots, twists, and turns, from my very humble beginnings to losing my mother during my first year of college, making $200 a week with $600 a month rent. You do the math on that. To feeling the enormous pressure of becoming the first college graduate in my family, to navigating male-dominated roles, to completing my undergraduate and dual master's degrees while a full-time employee, and lastly, to hearing more times than I can count, no, Tanya, you're not the right fit for this role. But when I think about it, it is a journey that has shaped me as a leader and a Black woman. As a little girl, I always knew two things. I love to build, fix, and break things, and my love for people that I now know is the catalyst for my altruism. So when I think about my current role, for me, it's really the intersection of passion and love, because I have a passion for people and a love for technology. And I get to really flex those muscles every day, in particular because I get to lead a team of people that love people as much as I do. So what I'd say before we even get to any closing is find your passion and love. And if they are one and the same, great. But if your journey comes with pivots, twists, and turns, continue on. Turn those headwinds into tailwinds. There is definitely room for all of us at the table. So again, as the VP of Operations, in addition to serving my team, I am focused on continuous improvements and operational efficiency, including customer excellence, as well as inclusion and diversity on the front lines in all levels of leadership. So Brett, let's jump into that very first slide. And I also say you have to equalize the rules as well. I think if I think about from the moment I was a younger girl and going through my career, that the rules weren't always equal, right? So I think we have to equalize the rules. But first and foremost, I'm very passionate about education, probably because my education journey was filled with so many pivots. But when I look at the communities and the underserved communities, there's a couple things. We need education. We need to absolutely bridge the digital divide. So I'm absolutely encouraged every time I pick up the paper or read the paper, because that's archaic. No one picks up the paper anymore, right? When I read an article that talks about organizations contributing X amount of dollars to bridging the digital divide. I know Cox is one of those organizations where we are contributing $60 million next year to bridge that digital divide. But really, when you think about the equal access and the equal opportunities, education, how do you make sure that these underserved communities have equal access to education? It's bridging the digital divide. And I would also go as far as to say financial literacy. I think in a lot of underserved communities, we don't talk financial literacy and making sure that our children have that financial fluency. In full transparency, I didn't learn it until I was probably in my 20s, and no fault of my parents. They were probably more focused on making sure that I had a good life as a Black little girl, and they didn't think about the financial piece of it. But when I look back now, I think those are three things that we absolutely need to hone in on: our education, financial fluency, and bridging the digital divide so that our folks in our communities have access to the internet.
What would digital inclusion or digital equity or digital diversity, equity, and inclusion look like in the 21st century? Well, minority businesses and business owners would have adequate connectivity tools. The role, the dollar amount of Black, Latinx, and Asian American businesses, including investment bankers, lawyers, and construction firms who participate in the contracts and businesses in terms of the build-out, access, adoption, and utilization of broadband would substantially increase. Black business owners need to be a part of building out, enhancing, and elevating the internet. The employment situation. There is a reservoir of talented Black and brown and Native American young people there. I meet them all the time. They're at mainstream institutions. They're at HBCUs, at predominantly Black. They're at predominantly or Hispanic serving institutions. They're at predominantly white institutions. These young people are out there. Have you heard of Philander Smith College? Have you heard of Tuskegee University? Have you heard of Prairie View or Xavier, North Carolina A&T, Howard Morehouse Spelman? Have you heard of Medgar Evers? Have you heard of Cheney University in Pennsylvania, where I was just this past summer? Do you go to Georgia Tech and specifically seek out the African American students who are there? Do you go to Chapel Hill and do the same? Do you go to Penn and Stanford and Michigan and UMass and MIT and do the same? Do you look at Texas Southern University and Jackson State University, where, yes, they're brilliant students studying technology, studying science, planning to be engineers? Are you doing that? We have to increase. This needs to be a call to action to increase the employment and upward mobility of Black, Latinx, Asian Americans, and Native Americans in the broadband industry. We have to have more affordability of broadband in the United States. We have to increase and improve educational outcomes, increase financial stability. What do we need? We have to have a broadband equity plan. And we need a broadband equity plan that whoever sits at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, whoever sits in the chairman's seat at the Federal Communications Commission, as well as the leaders on the private sector side, across the board in the technology and telecommunications business, are going to recognize that this moment is a moment of change. This moment is indeed a moment of crossroads. What is required? There must be a willful commitment to diversity and to inclusion, and that it is necessary for the survival of this nation. It is necessary for this nation to thrive in the 21st century, and we know how to get there. The question is there going to be indeed the will to do it? The investments have to be early. They have to be in middle school and in high school. They have to be supplemental. They have to be about identification. Those young people who animate and are excited about math, engineering, inventions, science, and technology, it usually begins to solidify when they're younger. It usually begins to solidify. It is at that point that the additional support and the additional help should take place. Xavier University of New Orleans, which is a great university, has a summer program called SOAR. They've had the program for many, many, many years. My daughter participated in the program, my older daughter in the 1990s when she was a high schooler. She didn't choose a field, choose a career in science or in math. My nephew just participated there a summer ago. As a result of his participation there, he decided to attend Xavier University in the field of pharmacy, which is a science-based field. I think the investments have to be early. I think they have to be supplemental. I think it involves after-school math, science, technology enhancements, summer math, science, technology enhancements that begin in middle school, begin in high school, to give the young people the extra support that they need if they have a predisposition. I also think that young people are animated. Math and science can seem very abstract until you understand what it creates. I'll give you one of the most interesting. I was at a social gathering, and I was sitting next to someone. We struck up a conversation, and I said, "What do you do?" A person says, "I'm a designer." So I'm thinking she's a clothing designer or a designer of homes and houses. She says, "No, I design housewares." I said, "Housewares?" She said, "Plates, vases." She said, "Do you realize that every one of those has a set of drawings, a set of specifications, design specifications, as though one were building a machine or building a house?" So I have to be like anyone who's in the design field. I have to know math. I have to understand science. I have to have grounding in geometry. I said, "That's so very interesting." She says, "But I'm really more of an arts person. But I couldn't do this work if I didn't have this foundation and grounding in science." So you don't think about it as a science field, but it's a science-based field. What's my point? We have to help young people connect with what, when you study a math or when you study science, what kind of career and work does that connect to? What does it connect to? How does it enable? Because it's foundational. If you work in the field, you're not going to spend all day, every day doing algebra problems if you choose to work in the science field. And I think that is why, for example, there's so much data that shows that students who take science, who have a first-class science lab at their disposal, are going to do far better than those that are learning it only from presentations, textbooks, and the like, and an occasional experience in a science lab. So it's about investing. It's about starting early. It's about identifying those that have a predisposition and working and helping to develop them.
As you know, and this has been mentioned over the last couple of hours, the pandemic have shown a spotlight on the digital divide. And we all know this is not new. But earlier this year, there were around 51 million students in public schools that were impacted by school closures. And as students moved to remote learning, there was a realization that many students didn't have access to the internet and other resources they needed to be able to learn. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, around 9 million students don't have access to the internet. And of those students, around 34% are not connected due to lack of affordability. And the big issue here is that the digital divide also disproportionately affects Black and Hispanic students. Again, this is not a new issue. We have been working on this for the last 8 years. And we have been doing this through our Verizon Innovative Learning Schools program, which provides free access, free devices, and a technology-rich curriculum complete with teacher training. So far, we've put technology in the hands of more than 350,000 deserving students, and we took the program one step further by committing to bring 5G to our schools to enable our students and teachers to be at the forefront of transformative technology. The program has reached 78% of students that are Black and Hispanic in our schools,
and around 82% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. So we are providing the technology access and the supports in schools that need it the most. We have also partnered with around 20 HBCUs to provide STEM skills to young middle school boys of color. So it is so important what Mark talked about, the importance of mentorship, the importance of reaching students when they're young, and also the importance of working with our HBCU colleges and universities across the US. So although Verizon has focused on social impact in the community for many, many years, earlier this year, we formalized our approach by supporting climate protection, human prosperity, and digital inclusion through our Citizen Verizon plan. And you saw a little bit of that in the video that we just played. But through climate protection, we'll be carbon neutral by 2035. And under human prosperity, we'll prepare 500,000 individuals for jobs of the future by 2030. And through our digital inclusion efforts, we will provide digital skills and STEM skills to 10 million youth by 2030. And this is the work that my team leads at Verizon.
So what can you do to have an impact? It's really about volunteering. As Juanita has introduced me, I have a full-time job. I work at JMA Wireless currently, but I am invested in our young people, especially kids of color, and wanting them to have a proper education, wanting them to be inspired, wanting them to pursue, if interested, careers in science and technology. So finding a foundation that's local to you is one way you can give back. There are clubs, organizations, college organizations, even at your own company. As we saw with the video, if you were working at Verizon, there's Citizen Verizon, there's the Verizon Foundation. I believe Cox was on earlier. Folks from Comcast and other companies all have foundations that if you're an employee at that employee at that company, you can participate with that foundation in some way or form. Or you can do what I did, which my wife may sometimes call me crazy. I actually ran for school board, and it's an elected position. So I had to put signs up and get involved, but being a part of a school board really enabled me to give back in a way of the programs around technology. What is the curriculum look like around mathematics in our district? One of the things we offer is 22 science and technology courses at the high school level. Anything from aerospace engineering to Python programming. So it is, you're able to do these things if you get involved. So my plea and how I'll wrap this up is it takes all of us. It takes a village to help, and don't be afraid to do it. Find that niche, find that thing that sparks you, and then go spark a young mind, because it matters. Thank you.
In conclusion, I just want to stress that the digital divide matters. And it matters because it will have a direct impact on employment and achievement in our underserved communities, our educational systems. I'm a mom, and one reason why I am fiercely active in the academic scene is because I understand the importance of not only being visible, but also showing my son and other kids the importance of being involved, and that your opinions matter, and that when you sit at the table, you will always bring a different perspective that will help to change the narrative of how programs are being delivered to your community and how children are being represented within the systems. So if anyone is interested or wants to know, I'm not really sure how I can help, I would say start with your local community and get involved. Call your superintendent of your public school and sit down and have a meeting with them and let them know what it is that you're interested in seeing in your district. If you're a private school parent, you're paying tuition, speak to the administrators there, let them know what you're looking for. But your words and what you need, it's important. And the only way that people are going to support the needs is if you're vocal about what it is that you need.
Underserved communities don't have as much in the way of disposable resources to utilize the tools that provide that gap. But I'm actually going to challenge that a little bit and say that, at least in this era, that's not exactly a true statement. Everyone we know has a Facebook. Everyone we know has a Twitter, Instagram, these digital applications that allow us to communicate and see the world beyond where our environment is. So I don't think it's necessarily at this day and age as much of a gap as there is a fundamental understanding of how to utilize or best utilize the resources that we have available to us. And that's where I'll kind of close out and fill in the gaps and where, as individuals, we can help close that gap further. Next slide, please. STEM is the key. So in my work within the National Society of Black Engineers, otherwise known as the largest student-run organization in the world that deals with bringing the thought and idea of achieving a career in STEM to Black and brown students. One thing we have come to realize is the earlier we catch kids and get them, for a better way of putting it, indoctrinated in the idea of a career in STEM, the better off they will be as they progress throughout their educational careers. Teaching kids that, come from these inner city communities that, hey, you can do more than utilize a ball to escape your environment. Making them aware of the many, many, many different ways within the STEM community that they can achieve this success. And my role within the National Society of Black Engineers, which focuses on the technology and or the information technology, for me is key. As Justina mentioned in my bio, I have held many positions throughout the years from many organizations, many companies, in various aspects of information technology. And I will admit that that's probably given me a bit of a better insight on how to better utilize the technology that we have available to us to do things that we would normally think of. Leslie mentioned that she was a bit surprised and embarrassed that she was surprised that older people would have been open to doing things such as virtual meetings, things of that nature. And from what I can say from my personal experience, when people have a better understanding of things available to them, they visualize better ways to utilize that technology. So with everyone that we know having a cell phone, some people maybe having two, we can't say that they're not connected because they are. The question is, are they utilizing that to the best of their ability? As was mentioned in some of the earlier sessions, we are now in the age of 5G, but in the age of 4G, these mobile phones and tablets that we had were already providing suitable bandwidth to utilize more of these services at distance without having to have a landline or be in front of a computer. So again, it's a question of how we conceptualize the technology that we have available to us to close that gap further. Next slide, please. Now we come to my bread and butter, information technology. If the easiest way to beat them is to join them, the easiest path for students coming out of underserved or just people in general coming out of underserved and impoverished areas is through information technology. I said college is overrated. I know I'm talking to probably a bunch of engineers. That's going to sound like an oxymoron, but you are talking to a college dropout with 24 years experience in the information technology field. And why is that? Because there's no degree requirement to get into this field and to be completely and totally successful. over the last couple of years, you've seen many companies like IBM and Google and several others, Fortune 500 companies, say that they would no longer require a college degree. Well, what does that say for a STEM field like technology? Well, that means that kids coming out of high school, early years in college, they can obtain the skills that will make them prepared and capable to not only bridge the gap, but to make that bridge a possibility. The field knows no limits. We're all in the middle of a national pandemic, a global pandemic that has seen many of us sequestered to our homes. Nobody's going to work, or limiting that as much as possible. There are industries, entire industries that are going under, entertainment industry, food industries, things of that nature. The one industry that I can assure you is completely insulated from anything like that is the IT industry. Because while everyone had to rush to work from home, people such as myself had to rush to make sure that it was possibility for everyone to work from home.
Panel that we're going to have now called Allies Promoting Racial Justice and Equal Opportunity. When the organizing committee was planning this forum, this is usually a very technical forum, we thought, if we're really serious about racial justice and equality and equity, the role of allies is so important, right? You think about major changes and transformative things that have happened throughout history, the abolition of the slave trade, abolition of slavery, civil rights movement, the Holocaust, major wars that were ended. None of these happened without the role of allies.
I've grown up in India. I lived in UK for about 3 years, and I came to US. I feel I belong to US, but there are times I also feel that I'm still a foreigner here, and that has an impact on how I see the world. But actually, the word ally for me was an English word. It's an ally, but I didn't see it in the context of racial justice and others until I would say, a few weeks ago, it started, the word started making rounds. And then, Abby, I'm not sure, but there was this training that was, shared internally, right? So I had the opportunity to take the training. It was a 2-hour training, awesome training. And there I actually came to know the difference between equality and equity. And it's like, for me, it is an eye-opening thing. We all look at equality as this powerful word that we need to provide equality for everybody. But ally is somebody who ensures that everybody comes out with the same outcomes. Another way to say is that regardless of their racial, or any other orientation, that it ensures that the same outcomes are guaranteed for them. To me, that kind of, in many ways is open that it's not about giving them the right starting point, but ensuring that they end up with the right ending point, that we all, get the same outcome. So, that privilege that we have, it's, often we take it for granted, but to get to that position, you got to have a path all the way from childhood that allows you to, go through those incremental experiences to get to where you want to be in Verizon. Not everybody has those. So just, looking at the time of employing somebody to see, can I give equal opportunity? It doesn't cut it. You have to go back to the childhood time. You have to look at underprivileged schools and others and say, how do you expose them to all the possibilities that are out there? And how do you actually give them opportunities? So whether it is, internship at a high school level, whether it is, exposing, and the previous conversation talked about digital divide and giving them laptops and whatnot, doing those kind of things. That's the second thing as technologists we got to look at. But finally, the third thing, actually, Carol talked about it, which is technology is supposed to be completely neutral to any bias. But the way technology is emerging is that you can absolutely see biases coming out. Being a technologist, and being a technologist, all of us are here, we have to look at those biases and root them out before they become beliefs. And, whether it is AI-based, computer vision and whether it is the other technologies that are emerging. I think as technologists, we got to watch out for them and ensure that we root them out before they become a belief and become a problem for the future. That's how I see our roles.
I think, Abby, for me, passion is what got me to STEM. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself, is I was born and raised in Ethiopia by parents that did not see race or gender as an obstacle for me to get into tech. Even though I was raised in a country where education access was a big challenge. So in my education, I would say the family support, my family support played a great impact in my, in my education or success in my education. When it comes to the corporate world, it wasn't easy, but it was, nevertheless, it was a very interesting journey. It was challenging, but challenge sometimes are good. You learn a lot from it. Hard work definitely has been at the forefront of everything I do to be able to gain trust and credibility. I took chances, raised my hand for things that would broaden me in any kind of way. But at the same time, staying at all times true to my passion and my calling. But I would raise something that is super important that was raised a few times today and right now, I think, by some of the panelists, is it is very critical to have mentors and sponsorship that would speak for you or on your behalf when you're not there. So I have a mentor that is sitting on this conference today that I think is super important and give some credit to my success, I think, in the corporate world.
Racial profiling, specifically how machine learning tools, they're created by, machine learning algorithms are created by these tools that go over biased data. And not only do they perpetuate the inequities of society, but they actually expand and they amplify them. So, and we're talking to a mixed audience of community and students. Students want to do right. They really do not want their tools used for evil. And so we have a real dynamic of interactions. Also, many of the people that have come to our panels from the community have worked in technology, and they have faced real discrimination of the kind that it's almost hard it's hard to point a finger at. They look at you and they say, well, we never hired somebody to look like you last time, so we're not going to do it this time. And then they hire somebody white and male who has no better qualifications, but they feel more comfy. So there were a bunch of people, who expressed that sort of experience. And, while not providing answers, this is a way to provide more exposure and more opportunity. And I think that's how people are dealing with it, because people are going to move themselves, and you need to have the knowledge. And as everybody has said, you need the exposure.
Absolutely.
You have to interact,
I think we do have an opportunity here. I mean, COVID is certainly tragic, and there's been a lot of terrible things that have happened because of it. But I think this is an opportunity for us to look for some silver linings and for companies and leaders to rethink some of the ways they're building their teams. COVID is a catalyst for change. It is going to change and be so disruptive in so many ways. And some of it can be positive. And I think that companies can start to think about this. We're all remote. And I know at Tilson, as soon as COVID hit, we made a decision to move our entire workforce remote. And we just ripped that Band-Aid off. We've always been a work from home friendly company. But instead of making it optional, it was mandatory. And in less than a week, we had our entire workforce working remotely. And we have continued to do so. We haven't actually occupied any of our offices. As a company headquartered in Maine, right now, statistically speaking, we have our population in Maine is only 1.7% Black Americans. And so when I think about what can we do from a change perspective,
COVID has forced us to revisit and look at our hiring opportunities and expand and be intentional about opening that network for candidates. We're seeing now that, again, not only can we work from home as a perk, we can work from home at scale, and it works. And working from home at scale works, and it allows us to also take advantage of not being tied to the location of our office, which dramatically expands our talent pool. Being in Portland, Maine can have its limitations if we're only looking at recruiting our talent based in that location or in some of our other locations that, just statistically speaking, don't have a greater population of Black Americans to choose from. And so having that option to be able to recruit essentially anywhere really opens up our candidate pool. And we're starting to rethink about that. And those are some of the changes. When I think about how do we make this not a season, those are the intentional changes that we can make in our organizations and as leaders that change the way that we think about our practices for hiring, recruiting, our locations of our workforce, that will have long-term impacts to how we think about our workforce. The second thing I think is, we talked to Carrie, you mentioned about the investment in our workforce. It is an investment that employers have to make if they want to continue to grow and develop a more diverse team. We've intentionally titled our leader of our HR and recruiting team as our VP of Workforce, because we think about workforce and HR not just as benefits and onboarding, but how do we think about developing that talent pipeline? And then how do we think about developing those skills and technical capabilities once they're in the door? And I think right now with COVID, there are exceptional candidates that are on the marketplace that may not have been in years past. And some of those are folks that don't have an engineering degree. I don't have an engineering degree either, but other folks are out there that have great leadership skills, management skills, are in adjacent industries that you can bring in and train and develop that have other skills and experiences that would really benefit the team. But it's identifying those candidates and then taking the opportunity to bring them in and having a way to develop their skills on a technical track that will help support the work that your company is doing. And I think it opens you up for a lot more candidate opportunities if you're willing to take the chance.
So, I thought a lot about this, what an ally means to me. And, what it really means to me is that I take on the fight for racial justice as my own. I speak out even when it's uncomfortable for me, and I take a stand because, just as if our lives depended on it and our children's lives depended on it, because it really does. It's alarming, these statistics. 2.9% of employees at tech companies are Black. And, we've got a long way to go. The challenge I see that leaders face from the staffing perspective and what we hear is they say it's a pipeline problem. They're moving very fast. They need to hire. They need skilled workers. They need them now. Very little willingness to train, and they want the experience. So that's a massive challenge that we are hearing from them. Now, my message to the leaders would be, HR leaders, talent acquisition, as well as hiring managers would be, you're not working hard enough to find the Black talent. And, it's interesting because the CEO of Tilson that Kelly works with, he actually he was wonderful. We were doing a panel at Verizon and he said this exact thing. People are not working hard enough to find the talent. So this talent, it's not the majority. And so it's very easy to find, let's say, 5 very qualified white male candidates, but you've got to look a little harder to get that diversity. You've got to be intentional with your searches. Don't stop
until you have at least one qualified Black candidate that you can interview. And I say don't stop because they're out there and we need to find them. The goal is to have a diverse pool of candidates. That's really the goal. And the second thing is that leaders need to create platforms that are fair. There's an incredible racial bias in hiring. In fact, I was looking at one study that shows there's an advantage to having a white sounding name in the hiring process. In fact, you have a 50% greater chance of getting an interview if you have a white sounding name. And so that's just one thing. The other piece is accent bias, that an accent is viewed less positively by the hiring leaders. But it all starts with a job description, really, that there are racially insensitive words that we don't even know exist in our job descriptions. And I think that really starts there, because this is, we feel this. We might read something, and even though it's not very clear on paper, we just get a feeling that this job is not for us. And one thing I was reading is they actually use the term brown bag lunches in a job description. And, I could go on and on about a different languaging, but it may not be something that's very clear to you. And leaders, you need to really get some help here to understand, to take all of that racial bias out of the job descriptions. The challenges for students and for professionals who are entering the tech world, number one is that 70 to 80% of jobs, they are gotten by networking or the network of the individual. So if you don't have a network, you're a student, or let's say, I heard this earlier, that there's, communities where there's no one in tech around them. So if you don't have a network, you're going to have a much more difficult time really getting those jobs and getting the access and getting in the door. Resumes. This is challenging because, it's a digital world now, and we have artificial intelligence platforms that are reading resumes and choosing them for the hiring managers. If you don't have the key words in there and the experience, then you just don't get recognized, and it goes just into a hole. And thirdly, there's conscious and unconscious bias. I mean, this is obviously a much bigger conversation, but it's something that really needs to be solved. So my message to students and professionals is, number one, build your network. Get out there and find champions and find sponsors, find people on LinkedIn, through communities. I mean, just be bold and meet people to build those networks so you can get your foot in the door, get into tech, and then rise up the ranks.
Really explicating this digital divide. And I have some photos that I want to share from my book to sort of bring it into context. When I'm done with that, I want to overlay that with the racial divides. And there's no secret that is the other pandemic that is happening as we battle COVID. And then I want to end up with this concept of digital justice. And I want to leave you all there, much like my friend and mentor Mark Morial probably already left you, as to what are the implications of not having inclusivity involved in these conversations as technology becomes the new normal. So let me start with the digital divide before I go into the slides. I mean, right now, we are in a state of siege. This virus has basically debilitated the economy, the social discourse, the education, the employment, the business and entrepreneurship opportunities. African Americans are most hit by this. It's no secret to all of you that Black Americans have COVID now listed as the third likely disease to kill them, alongside other chronic conditions like diabetes and blood disease and pulmonary vascular conditions. In addition to that, Latinas, as well as Native Americans, people from tribal lands actually don't come too far behind. And largely that is a result of our inadequate access to healthcare, our inadequate access to proper housing and food, and the fact that we have been frontline workers in this pandemic. Those realities are so pressing, my friends. I mean, I personally, coming from New York, lost 4 or 5 people at the onset of this pandemic, and I'm sure many folks on this conference also have some type of connection to someone who has been infected or has died from COVID. In the state of the pandemic, we also learned that the best way for us as a country to heal and to recover, we thought,
was to social distance. And social distancing had implications. What it meant was we could no longer go to the big box stores and purchase anything. We could no longer go into our office buildings and work. I mean, all of us like myself are working from some spot in your home where you pray that your dog does not bark or your child does not come and interrupt you. We can no longer go to hospitals that were already distressed with COVID patients and clinicians who encouraged us not to actually go. And people of color, more so, could not actually go into many of these places unless they were going to work. There was a statistic that I just recently read that Amazon workers, 19,000 of them have been infected with COVID based on the type of work that they do in the warehouse. So these are realities, and the realities prompted a change, a swift change, something that was already actually happening in terms of the disruption of historical industries, but actually was accelerated as a result of the pandemic. So here we are, social distancing, and now we have to do things online. Before the pandemic, 18 million Americans were unconnected or disconnected. They were in unserved or underserved areas. 18 million people who resemble disproportionately populations of color, low income, disabled, older Americans, foreign born, and people from rural America. And I would argue that when we discovered that 18 million folks that were disconnected throughout the 7 months, there are probably more that have become additionally disenfranchised because of the lack of access to broadband. In addition to that, we discovered something very interesting in the educational context. 50 million kids in this country go to public schools. About all of them were sent home very early in the pandemic for social distancing. When those kids were sent home, according to Common Sense Media, 15 to 16 million of those kids did not have home broadband access or a device, and 9 million didn't have either. And these kids were disproportionately the same people who constitute the 18 million who are not online. So now we have a pandemic that has showed up in terms of the type of inequities that were probably already there under the digital divide, but they become more exacerbated. In addition to that, we find that we have a disproportionate outlay of the type of work that particular communities do, and the injury that was actually incurred upon vulnerable workers who were either going to be exposed as hospital and home healthcare aides, as teachers, as Uber drivers, that they tended to also be from Black and brown communities. And so given all of this, what I have found to be so interesting, I'm gonna go back to the school example, is that institutions that were not necessarily in the business of accelerating broadband or digital access had to automatically become part of that conversation. So in the last 7 months, I've been talking to a lot of schools. You would not believe the number of superintendents and school board members, as well as educators and parents who are now in the business of trying to identify ways to accelerate broadband access to their homes. You would not believe the number of those educators and administrators who did not even know if their students had home broadband. It was not a typical question that would be asked on an enrollment application or a re-enrollment application. Consequently, big school districts like New York City Public Schools or Los Angeles Unified School District essentially threw up their hands and closed early, where we have young people who did not actually finish the last school year, who have now entered into a new school year with a variety of models based on the fact that we have not solved the digital divide. When we think about the digital divide, it goes further than that, because while we have been disconnected from these resources, we have had this concurrent pandemic of racism and discrimination happen, where we now can see on our phones and shared among social media the images of George Floyd, 8 minutes and 46 seconds, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. We didn't see, but we feel it when we look at her parents. We as African Americans are going through the trauma of being disconnected, of being connected in ways that now we not only broadcast the resilience of Black Lives Matter, but we also broadcast the struggle, the disadvantage, the discrimination that happens in the wake of law enforcement not respecting Black lives. My friend, can you imagine what that feels like in this age of where being connected has always been the lowest barrier to entry? In my book, I talk about that. I entitle it Digitally Invisible, because really digital has always been like this gateway where you didn't have to show your face, or you didn't have to be, in a business or office building. You could actually be in a garage or in a basement, like I'm sitting right now, in a room, and develop a business. But if you think about what we're actually seeing, we want the revolution televised. But what will be the mental health implications on Black people, white people, and others who have had to experience the pandemic in terms of the public health consequences, the loss of life, and the loss of life through, incredulous street law enforcement that sees us as just a body and not a person? As I tell people all the time, we should no longer use our cell phones as ways to immobilize our engagement. If anything, even if they're not permissible in court, they tell the history of what we're battling against, what we're struggling for, what we are standing up against to ensure that the ideological principles of white supremacy and power and privilege do not cancel what we as people believe. And that leads me to this concept of this new digital normal that has a prerequisite of being connected, this new racial divide that in many respects overlays with the systemic inequalities that also find themselves among those people who are not as connected, lend itself to the new generation of what happens next in technology. And I would suggest to you, as I also do artificial intelligence, when it comes to thinking about how data is used, that is another challenge that we will have ahead of us. The fact that we now have this currency of data as the primary engine for platform companies to essentially micro-target in advertising should actually ring some alarms. I mean, listen, don't get me wrong. I go on Facebook. I love me some Instagram. And when it's time, I do go to LinkedIn. In fact, I tell people all the time, I love Black boots. I cannot tell you how much I love to purchase a pair of Black boots. And I actually like that the computer knows that I like Black boots. Because every time I come on, it's either a short heel, a longer heel, a stiletto, you name it. They're speaking to me. They know me. But they also know, in many respects, that I have a Black child, a female child, who still plays with dolls. And when I purchase my dolls, they have a brown skin tone. And you add that with a person who likes to buy Black boots, who might oftentimes look at her credit card balance to make sure she can purchase all these things that she's talking about. And out of that, the computer may infer that I'm broke or I actually fit the criteria for populations that have been disadvantaged as a result of the wealth gap. So we're now dealing with not just being structurally connected, not just having, this ability to compete in a digital economy, but now we're dealing with the fact that the computer knows more about us than we often know about ourselves. And when they know that about us, that can create what's called algorithmic discrimination.
Quite a takeaway from this. First of all, Dr. Chan told us, he really encouraged us to think about mentoring. And I've been trying to think about that and not distract myself all day, but Mark Morial talked about that as well. And so many people mentioned it today. Exposing students early is so key. And that's why this forum and the time that we took today, we're going to be sharing this content with the students in public schools, with the HBCUs, with the goal of inspiring those communities. We also got challenged on being allies, but not just allies that are empathetic, but allies that take action, allies that recruit other allies or male white colleagues who are playing a lot of the decision-making roles, teaching them about what's important and bringing them along on this journey. We also talked about using technology to inspire, to drive service excellence. We learned about 5G. We learned about how we're responding to COVID. We learned about service excellence and enabling, using technology to enable that. Just fantastic group of work being presented here today. And the digital divide, we're no longer calling it the digital divide. We're calling it digital inclusion. We're being solution oriented and we're calling it digital inclusion now. And we're going to continue to solve and make that improved. Scott, are you back with us now? No, still can't hear you. Oh, man. Okay, so on behalf of Scott, I just want to say, picture of a true ally. After the George Floyd death, murder, Scott texted me, said, "How are you doing? How can I help?" And it was a pretty raw state for me. I was very honest. I don't even remember what I said, but it was very honest about just the state of what I think really truly needed to happen in this country. And Scott said, "You know what? I'm going to think about it." I didn't hear from him for a couple of weeks. He came back, said, "Hey, you know what? The organizing committee met and we want to do this. Will you help us?" So I want us to close with a picture of what a true ally looks like. And there are many people behind. There's Jason Boswell. There's Kelly Craig. There's Aman Singh. There's, let's see, Kelly Krantz. There's just Kevin Krantz, sorry. Just a whole team. And you heard the call from Dr. Chan. He wants us to help him. So we're going to all send him emails like, "We're here to help you, and use us in any way that you think so that we can utilize this body. This largest technical body in the world is asking for help, and we're going to do that." So Scott, thank you. Everybody, thank you. Blue Jeans team, you were amazing. Everybody have a great day.